And I've got the distinct pleasure of being both your guest host today, as well as hopefully share some great content with you on the sales community's Tech Sales Insights. On behalf of Randy Seidel, Tucker, Jesse, and the entire team, I want to welcome you to this live stream. We're live on several social channels, and although I want to share with you insights on kind of the common challenges, opportunities, I think a chance to really think and lead very differently this next year, particularly with your sales kickoff meeting. I'm going to expand that and talk about broader marquee events you may be thinking about, you might be planning. I want to share ideas and insights and perspectives. I've had a lot of conversations. We're booking SKOs well into February and March. But I also want to make sure you get out of this session that which you might be curious about or you want to know more about. So I would encourage you to jump in with your questions, with your comments, with your ideas, with things that you might be doing that I'm sharing that might be relevant to the group. A lot of the sales community are technology sales executives, but I'm hoping a broader audience will get a chance to see this as well, because I think it's relevant to not just the revenue engine, sales, marketing, business development, channel partners, but also I think the broader community and the broader kind of functional leaders, from product to customer success to internal infrastructure. I think this is relevant to HR. This is relevant to RevOps and all the different kind of, not just the value creators, but the value enablers as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on a presentation that I've created, and I want to take you through the ideas. Note of warning, I'm a content presenter, so we're going to cover a lot of ground in the time that we have together. I would encourage you, again, to jump in, questions, comments that you want to further address on or clarify, as well as encourage you to maybe watch the recording of this afterwards. And I'll give you a couple places at the end where we can also continue the conversation, and I would welcome that. I'm fairly active in our own community. I'm in the sales community. And I want to make sure we continue the discussions beyond this session. So let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. And Tucker, in the executive producer of these things, is hard at work. So again, David Nour, I'm CEO of an Atlanta-based firm called the Nour Group. We do a lot of strategic growth advisory work. I'm fairly active on various social channels, so just add David Nour. And you can obviously use at Sales Community and the hashtag of Sales Kickoff, Tech Sales Insights, if you so choose. Very quickly about my background. I'm originally from Iran. I came to the US in 1981 with a suitcase, $100, didn't know anybody, didn't speak a word of English. And anytime I share this with folks from Iran, I don't know if you've kept up with news, but there's a real human crisis going on, and you know, the women of Iran, interestingly enough, and the girls of Iran are fighting with their lives for freedom. And if you haven't heard it, if you haven't seen it, they need you, and they need all of us to kind of amplify their voices. They're fighting for real human rights, and the things that we're blessed to take for granted where we live, they just can't do. So for the regime to kill a 22-year-old because her hair is showing from her job is just unfathomable. And I hope you'll join us in creating this awareness for folks that are fighting, like I said, for their basic human rights. My career is 3 phases. Phase 1 was technology sales, IBM, Silicon Graphics, business objects. And, you know, I carried a bag, sales manager, marketing, market development, if you will. And then I went the consulting route and president of a company, and spent a number of years at a private equity firm. 20 years ago, I hung my own shingles, doing advisory work, doing executive coaching, doing a lot of speaking, moderating. So I typically speak at 15 to 20 different sales kickoff meetings throughout the year. Obviously, Q1 is a big focus, but there are a lot of companies, as you know, where their fiscal year isn't their calendar year, right? So I'm doing sales kickoffs in June and October. So it's an opportunity to get to know a lot of different executives, a lot of different leadership teams. I'm involved. Sometimes I show up, I deliver my keynote, and I leave. Other times I'm blessed to really be involved with the planning process, with the thinking of it. And this is a lot of where these insights come from in conversations and discussions, and candidly, seeing some sales kickoffs go exceptionally well. I mean, you're just so proud to have a very small part in what this incredible company has done, from the logistics to the content to how people feel to the outcomes that we're after. And I've got to tell you, without naming names, I've sat and I've participated in sales kickoffs where you're just cringing, like, it just for various reasons that just the outcomes you were after or they were after just didn't materialize. So that's where a lot of these insights that I want to share with you today are coming from. The other thing beyond showing up and delivering your own content, I love insights from others. So, for example, the great American in the middle is former, now retired, General Tom Bostic, who ran the Army Corps of Engineers. And this guy was responsible for $380 billion a year in annual spend. I mean, his team rebuilt the New Orleans shorelines after Hurricane Katrina. So love talking to people who think and are, they think differently. They're doing really interesting things. I've moderated panels of customers, your own executives. We'll talk about this. Your own executive team, whether me or others, having an intelligent, engaging moderator ask them questions that the audience wants to know becomes invaluable. So I love moderating customer panels, board members, executives, channel partners, because there's a lot of rich ideas and perspectives from them as well the audience could benefit from. Like many of you, with the pandemic, I've had to go digital. I think it was March of 19. We're coming back from Cancun, my kids' spring break, and I realized I'm not going to be on a stage anytime soon. Certainly nobody's going to want you in their offices. So that's my setup. It's a digital SLR that you're looking at with lighting, with a couple monitors. The room next door, I've literally built a virtual studio in my home office, and I can deliver that content from anywhere. And I think that's important for you and your team, because I think you would agree digital is not going to go away. And in terms of, it doesn't replace us meeting in person, but you're going to continue to do kind of hybrid meeting, and to nurture those hybrid relationships. I think digital is going to continue to be a critical component. In terms of the agenda for today, I want to cover 3 topics. The 10 biggest mistakes, challenges that I continue to see leaders make. Some of them are going to be really obvious to you. Others you may have not thought of in the same way. 2, I don't want anything from you. What I want for you is to hopefully think and lead your SKO differently. Again, I've been a rep. You're so excited about, especially now after this pandemic, getting back together in person, and excitement and momentum. And you have to hear this, that relationships go bad with misaligned expectations. So I'm busy. I value my time. If we all invest time and effort to take 2-3 days to come to a sales kickoff, and I'm expecting this, I don't want to experience this, because the gap is where we start to have doubts, and I start to take calls from recruiters, and that person isn't as sharp, that product isn't as ready, I don't think we're ready. You don't want that doubt to kind of creep in. So I want you to think and lead differently about how do we deliver exceptional experiences for that audience at this sales kickoff, because it's an enormous opportunity, and I think you absolutely get that. And then I want to talk beyond, again, a sales kickoff. I want to talk about some other marquee events we're working on for ourselves and with our clients and with customers, and I think that might be useful to you as well. So again, I want to encourage you, and I'll toggle back and forth. Make sure if you have questions, comments. Jesse, good to see you, my friend. Rick, Diana, always nice to see you. And you're right, Jesse is the man. So thanks for being here. And I encourage, again, jump in with questions, comments you may have. So 10 biggest mistakes in working with a lot of global clients. I would submit, when we found out that there's 2 types of individuals that are involved with meetings. There's the meeting owner, that is typically the executive that has a set of desired outcomes in mind. Nobody puts a meeting together because they're bored. And then there are meeting planners that are charged with executing that vision. So you want to make sure you don't confuse the two. So let's get very crystal clear on the outcomes that we're after, whether it's a sales kickoff or a product launch or whatever it is. Let's pretend it's a streaming, movie. Let's go to the end and tell me, what did we accomplish? And more importantly, less about us. How do we make this more about the audience and what they want to take, what we want them to take away from the end of the session? So I'm a big believer of, and Covey used to say the same thing, start with the end in mind, and let's work our way backwards as we build the agenda, as we talk about the content. So, and let's make sure we put the meeting planners, God bless them, their best days is when nothing goes wrong. And if it all goes smoothly, people expect that. And the minute it's too hot or the food is cold or you can't logistically make things happen, unfortunately, they're the ones that get blamed. So let's really set them up to succeed, because it's just regrettably a thankless job. And by the way, critical that you recognize them. And we'll talk about this before the end of the session, that this wouldn't be possible without often this team of individuals that made it happen. I think it's important to also highlight my bias. The lens which I look at sales kickoffs through is one of strategic relationships. So if you think about what your sellers, what your audience, what the team needs to accomplish is a set of outcomes. How do we help them really think through the relationships they need, both before they come, during, while they're there together, more importantly, after? So what channel partners will they need to really succeed? What customer and relationships they need to focus on this next year to meet, if not exceed, their expectations? And as I mentioned, I've been blessed to write several books, most notably Relationship Economics. Co-Create is all about none of us have all the answers, so how do we co-create great results? Most recently, Curve Benders, all about future of work and all the headwind, maybe some tailwind, and certainly some turbulence we're all headed for. By the way, Relationship Economics has done really well, and Wiley's asked me to publish and I've written a completely brand new third edition. This will be out in February, and this is a lot of what I'm talking about is how did relationships change during the pandemic, and what do we need to do to think differently about our hybrid relationships that are not just physical, but also virtual and certainly global. So this is the lens of which I'm coming through our discussions. I think it's important to start with and really think about what makes the most sense in person and what we can continue to do virtually. So again, bottom of the page, virtual interactions are most effective. If you're putting on a sales kickoff to simply transfer information, do yourself and do the entire company a whole lot of favors and don't do it, because that is pretty effective online. And to drag people and just to share information, I'm not convinced that's a really good use of time. As you come up that list and you ultimately get to energizing interactions, and we're going to talk about motivation versus inspiration in a second, sense of purpose, feedback, solve problems, challenges, career advice, right? So all of those things are best done in person. So don't confuse the two. And I believe at sales kickoffs, you need a combination of this, but ideally it's more to the top, more in the green arena, if you will, versus what's at the bottom. That's number one. Number two, if you look at, and again, I tell most of my clients, you're either going to love my candor or you're going to hate my candor. But if we candidly look at some of the dysfunction, some of the obstacles, some of the challenges that are in some organizations, this is, in my opinion, this is a Harvard Business Review survey of 270 corporate leaders. It's political turf wars. This is my sandbox. Respectfully, don't pee in my sandbox. And it's cultural issues. And so we've got to get beyond these things before we get those sellers together. We got to get, and it's a we challenge and we opportunity, not those SOBs in marketing or those useless people in channels. Or anytime I go into a company and hear us and them or those guys, what I'm not hearing is we. What I'm not hearing is that we're all rowing with the same velocity and veracity in the same direction. So let's get this, even if it's for those 2 or 3 days, set aside so they don't see why we can't think or lead differently, and I don't know how many of you on this session have kids, but kids can see that mom and dad are fighting, or they're certainly not happy with each other, so can those sellers in the audience. They can see that we're not on the same page. They can see and they hear nuances of, hold on a second, my CRO said one thing, my CMO's on stage saying something else, and the product guys are saying yet something else. And so they don't feel, and this is critical, you can't just say it, they need to feel it, a connective tissue, an alignment. We're on the same page. And this is assumed often, but not intentionally checked off and committed to. We're going to be on the same page. Here's the key message they're going to hear. Words matter. In 2022 and 2023, words matter. So even the language you use has to be aligned with how we present our product, our market, our ecosystem, our priorities. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. So a really good analogy to think about your sales kickoff, and particularly the market this next year, is if you've ever played a dynamic sport, soccer, lacrosse, hockey, or your kids play it, I think you would agree with this assertion that 90% of these games are played when you don't have the ball, when you don't have the puck. So the best players on the best teams are always thinking, and they're always asking, where should I be? What should I be doing? How do I best prepare to put myself and my team in the best possible position when we do get the opportunity? When we get the ball, when we get the puck, when we get that we intercept and we have an opportunity to attack and go score and win, is because of series of things that happen in a very dynamic environment. What's important is that you see and you help your teams see this scenario as the market we're faced with. There's very little any of us can do. We're not the Fed about the looming, potential recession or inflationary pressures or the constant battle to find exceptional talent or access to the capital markets. And there's a lot that's not in your control. Let's not get distracted by things we cannot control. What we can control is our own practice, is our own prep, is our own teamwork, is our crisp passes. I played soccer for a whole bunch of years. My son played lacrosse. If that ball is not in that stick, it's going to be a hard, it's going to be a difficult chance to move that ball around, right? So think about the fundamentals in a very dynamic environment. How do we best prepare? So when we do get the opportunity, everybody knows economies are cyclical. If it goes down the next 12 to 18 months, it will rebound. So how do we best put ourselves in a position for not only opportunities that are going to come during, but certainly after? And it's that most recessions are followed by enormous economic growth opportunities. So really think about, what should we be doing? Where should we be? What skills, what knowledge, what behaviors, what tech stack, what processes, what sales enablement, what executive dashboards do we need to put ourselves in the best possible position to succeed when the market does come around? In thinking that in that way, with that lens, with that aperture, I often ask, and this is a really good mindset to go into your SKO with, which is, how will we compete? Are you going to be business as usual, where, you know what, we've been successful? And this is particularly prevalent with companies that have been successful. And I don't know if you've seen the same thing or not. I'm seeing a lot of leaders equate COVID growth with forever growth. For whatever reason, often not of their own doing, but just the nature of what happened, right? If I'm locked down and I don't have as many options for entertainment, I have more discretionary spend because I'm not spending it on travel or whatever, I can go buy things. I can go do certain things. That is episodic. That is not going to be forever growth. You keep doing what you've always done, and you're going to, at the risk of Randy never inviting me back, I think you're going to be irrelevant. If you compete for the moment, hey, can I show you our mousetrap? Because our cloud-based security thing does, a little bit better than their cloud-based security thing. It's clever, but it feels like more of the same. So you're going to be momentary. Only when you continuously think about how will we continue to compete is the way you remain relevant. And that audience, that sales team, that organization needs to hear from you and your leadership team of how will we compete in the future? How will be better off? How will our customers, our prospects, our channel partners, our relationship ecosystem will be better off because we're constantly thinking about how will we compete in the future? That's how you remain relevant. So the other thing that I'm noticing, a lack of sense of urgency. Right? Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll do that next quarter. We'll do that next. The second half of next year sounds great for that initiative. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Right? Oh crap! Was that today? Was that happening today? Right? You got to infuse a sense of urgency. And I tell our small team, do not wait to do something next week that you can do this afternoon. So building that culture that every minute of every day matters, and let's have a sense of urgency. Let's move with a purpose. I got a fun story. I grew up, I'm an Eagle Scout, grew up in scouting. So number one, in scouting, they drive into you that early is on time and on time is late. Right? Number one. Number two, move with purpose, because you could dally in the way you set up your tent site or campsite, and here comes the storm, and you didn't get your tent up, you didn't get your rain fly up, or you can dally and miss the activity. And so getting these kids to move with a purpose, and I think a lot of sales organizations could benefit from that. So let's jump into a question. Mark Fonseca, good to see you, my friend. Mark is here. What are, in your opinion, what are the top 3 challenges CEOs face going into 2023? Mark, beyond my opinion, it's conversations. Believe it or not, supply chain is going to continue to be a challenge for many, not just 23, but a lot of the data that I've seen is well into 24. So supply chain is 1. 2, talent that is quietly quitting, talent that is not engaged, talent that, especially since most of them are still remote, it's very difficult to build that thriving culture remotely. You got to find reasons, and not gimmicky ones. And I don't believe you're going to be able to force this, but you got to give people a reason to kind of get together. You got to give them a reason. Some of the things I shared earlier, that to build that camaraderie, to build that learning and growth opportunities from each other at varying levels of the organization. So supply chain is still a huge issue. Talent, the right mix of talent. And I would submit to you, and I picked this up from a CEO and a board member that I respect immensely, and I love his comment, the power of deduction. So a lot of leaders are very good at adding. Here's what we did this year. Let's add more to it next year. Here's what we did. Let's add more. Nobody wants to take things off. So in accounting, there's a very disciplined process called zero-based budgeting. So just because we spent $1 million on marketing or advertising last year does not mean we're going to spend $1.2 million this year. Let's go back to zero and really justify every investment. Really look at, do we have the right mixture of talent in territory? Do we have the right supporting resources to help the team deliver on the commitments we need them to make and deliver? So zero-based and zero-basing everything would go a long way. So this idea of power of deduction, how do we reduce? How do we not just continue to add, but really zero-base it would go a long way. So I hope, Mark, that's helpful to you and answers that question. So the biggest mistakes. I tend to think about sales kickoffs. I tend to think about marquee events, almost like theater acts, with before, during, and after. BDA, before, during, after. Direct correlation with the success of the event, as well as the impact of it afterwards with what you choose to do and how you choose to invest before. So if there's confusion, and these are the 10 biggest mistakes I see with leaders who are planning the SKO. Confusing vision, direction, misaligned initiative, and strategic priorities. I kid you not, I spoke to one leader who told me to have 69 priorities. And I said, respectfully, you have no priorities. because most people can't remember more than 3. So you got to get crystal clear. Here's the vision. Here's the direction. Here's our key strategic initiatives, priorities, and for love of God, please, no more than 3 to 5. Because if you rattle off a whole bunch, I'm not going to remember any of them. Number 2, lack of clarity on bi-directional purpose. A lot of people talk about a company having a purpose. Nobody's talking about those employees. Those sellers have a purpose. They have things that are important to them. And increasingly, it's becoming what I call work-life blending. I love my wife. I love my kids. I want to spend more time with my kids, not work 80-hour weeks. When I travel, I want to, work maybe Thursday, Friday, maybe have my wife and kids come join me and spend the weekend with them. When I go on vacation, I don't want to take my laptop and work from side of the pool because I'm missing out on my kids growing up. So if you don't understand those things about your sellers, about the audience that you're trying to engage, you're trying to influence, you're going to talk at them. And they'll be polite because they're held hostage, right? They're going to be polite. They're going to listen. They're just not going to agree. So there's an opportunity here to really focus on bi-directional purpose. Here's what we want to go do as a company. If that doesn't excite you, if you're not if that's not what you get excited in the morning tackling, this may not be the right role, right? Great person, it might not be the right role because they're going to be short-term, right? They're going to be transactional. So bi-directional purpose. Too many thinkers in the room planning, putting the agenda together without sufficient understanding of the needs of the doers. If you've never sold, if you've never been in a territory, if you've never carried a bag, if you've never worked with channel partners, if you've never had to do a demo, you don't understand what they need. One of my favorite executives, Dennis Sadlowski, often talks about outside-in leadership, senior executive at Siemens, Energy and Automation, formerly. And he asked every one of his senior executives to go out and spend time with real and paying customers. So he understood not only where the customers were coming from, but the fact that we're at corporate, we're making it way too difficult for those sellers to do their jobs. When selling is less than 10% of what they're doing, think about it a second. What do we have got them doing the other 90% of the time? Now, I don't have anything against expense reports and all the other things they've got to do. The administrative stuff is important, but how well do we understand the needs of the doers? Because a whole lot of thinkers, brilliant people are putting the agenda together, they're putting the plan together without a crystal clear understanding, sufficient understanding of the needs of the doers. During, and I could go on, but let me just give you the top 10. During, a lot of leaders confuse motivation that's intrinsic with inspiration that can come from external sources. You cannot motivate someone to take initiative. I don't believe you can train someone on intelligence. I don't believe you can train someone to take initiative and ask better questions. And you got to have people to think. So if you invite a motivational, and I've got a lot of friends that do this, but raw speakers, that's fantastic that this person climbed Everest. Most of your reps are never going to climb Everest. This person cut off their arm so they could survive. I'm not sure most of your reps are cutting off their arms on sales calls. That's great. That motivation is great. 20 minutes later, most of them can't tell you what the person spoke about. Conversely, if you inspire them to really think about what and how they should behave differently, what skills, what knowledge they need back in their territories, back with their relationships, you'll create much longer term impact. 100-pound bag of content into a 1-pound box. So I got to tell you, I've seen 2 and 3 day agendas that have 70, 80, 100 sessions on them. And I'm like, I get it. SCs want time, and product people want time, and certainly legal and HR want time, and we want to show them the product. And is that a company meeting or is this a sales kickoff? So I'm a huge believer of less is more. And by the way, there's got to be some connective tissue between all these great ideas, right? Otherwise, it's going to come across as disparate. And wait, did any of these people talk to each other before they showed up? And it just feels disconnected. Create an event versus a development process. Do not let your SKO be an event. An event is highly transactional. Events come and go. Events are forgotten. I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, much less some important thing you told me I should be doing at an event 11 months ago. Conversely, if you make it a development process. So at the SKO, we're going to, this year's Sales Kickoff, we're going to introduce this idea. By the way, take out your calendars, mark your calendars, because once a quarter, for the next 3 quarters, we're going to reinforce this idea. That's a development process. That's an opportunity to take an idea that you springboard, you introduce at the kickoff and really take it further down the road. Content is not actionable. I don't know about you. I've sat at SKOs and I've heard some great presentations, and I think I'm pretty intelligent. I'm scratching like my head like, what do you want me to do with this? How's this relevant to me? So the elevator ride to me is you need the theoretical. You need to understand constructs, frameworks, where did something come from? But you also want application, examples, and then implementation. Here's what you can go do with this. If you don't create the elevator ride, you're going to create cognitive dissonance. I get it. I like it. Sounds really cool. What do you want me to go do with it? How can I apply it? This is not relevant to me. And a big mistake is you put people on that stage who are very proud, rightfully so, of their own world, and their presentation becomes all about me. You sit there, you be quiet. Let me tell you how smart I am. Versus, how do I become Yoda? Every presenter on your stage should be Yoda. How do I make sure my audience takes away some great insights from this, and it's about them and how they'll be better off because of this information? After the fact, again, do not, when everybody takes their swag and have had a great 2-3 days together and they go back, you got to find opportunities to follow through. Follow through is a process. Follow up is a transaction. You sending a survey of how was the food and how was the temperature, and it's important. I don't want to take anything away from logistics. Critical to create a seamless experience. But what are you doing to ensure that what the signals you tried to send during your SKO was in fact the signals that were picked up? And they're going to go put it to use. They're going to go create real impact from it. No real or material metrics or milestones. I would submit to you that every SKO should have a series of objectives. How will you measure your return on objectives? How will you did we accomplish what we're after? And I've asked leaders, I've asked people in the field, hey, wasn't this idea presented at your SKO? What have you done with it since? Or how did you implement it? Oh, we had great, rah-rah motor. We had great stuff the first month or so. And then if you ignore it long enough, it just kind of went away. So imagine how much time, effort, money you're spending on that SKO. What's the return on the objectives? Last but not least, I reiterate that content is not actionable. What I'm looking for is the how. The second part of that is, how did you implement? How did you apply the content? How did you bring that content to life? How did you, so if the during is a set of guidelines, a recipe, the after is the meal. I want to know what impact did that create. I want to know if they applied that idea, if they took that product approach, if they engaged that channel partner, what impact, what results did we create from doing that? Because it should be a learning and growth opportunity for the very next one. So let me pause here. Let me go to questions, comments. Again, this is a chance to jump in. I know it's a very seasoned group. I know many of you have already planned your sales kickoffs, but I'd love to hear your comments. This list. Are you struggling with any of these things? Are these, a challenge for you? Are these, are these a non-issue? Or how are you addressing these? Would love to have you jump in to the comment section and share if any of these are ones you continue to see whether in your own organization or other organizations that you're involved with. But this is an ongoing challenge for many. So again, I'll come back. I'll pause, make sure there's questions, comments that we can address. But to continue, so how do you think and lead differently? Just a data point for you that a lot of this stuff didn't exist in 2006. If I told you that you'd be laying in bed with a piece of glass, and on it you could get all the global news and connect with people with video calls and buy anything you wanted 10 years ago, you'd think I'm crazy. But most of us have some sort of tablet that we use. So really important as you think and lead differently to think about the evolution and what technologies are going to impact the way your sellers, the way your audience works. So if they browse, if they store, if they do video calls or operating systems or social, what better opportunity than to actually incorporate some of these new technologies as you present? And I'm not trying to tell you to present so much sizzle that the steak gets lost. By the same token, one of the challenges, a lot of sales kickoff meetings, they're boring. They're really boring. And we don't use some of these really cool technologies that are available to us to present ideas and to have people sit on the edge of their seats and not be on their devices because they're just bored. Think about it a second. When they pick this thing up and start doing this, whatever they're doing is a hell of a lot more interesting than whatever you're presenting. So let's think about some really interesting technologies that we can incorporate. The other thing is a lot of our clients are amidst some sort of transformation. A lot of them are going to fail to deliver the outcomes they're after. Of the ones that succeed, even a lesser percentage are going to claim any kind of sustainable gain over time. And adoption just falls off a cliff when it leaves Mahogany Row and cascades through the rest of the organization. So what thinking and leading differently really entails is you and your team getting beyond intellectually understanding that change is critical and helping the team act on it. So if you don't analyze what you did from your BDRs to your SDRs to your commercial reps to enterprise reps to the channel alliance partners this past year, if you don't analyze what worked and what didn't, you're going to continue to do the same thing and expect different results from a very different market. So you realize you need to change intellectually. How will you act on it? How will we actually implement it? How will we? So great SKOs also incorporate change management, particularly if you're trying to change their behaviors. If you're trying to add a skill, help them gain new knowledge, that's great. Implementing those, benefiting from those often requires a change in behavior. And you need to incorporate some facets, some kind of change management skills, best practices in the way you roll out your SKO. So, PwC does an annual global survey. The good news is top line growth continues to be a big challenge in the hearts and minds of many CEOs. How will we drive top line growth? So we see a bigger executive board, CEO commitment to the SKO, to the sellers, to the needs of the sellers, because they're the top line. And the threats to the top line is what's keeping a lot of the CEOs and boards really concerned. So again, if you're going to think differently, you need to think more holistically. So this is our customer lifecycle journey maturity model. And again, most organizations have some sort of digital on-ramp. You're creating awareness with your marketing efforts. You're creating engagement. If you have any kind of a PLG freemium model, that's how they come on board. They're evaluating, obviously selling, the sales force sells it. I often coach my clients. The relationship really starts when the customers actually buy. At some point, it's great to see, again, more leaders really embrace customer success and really build maturity in their customer success. Is there a handoff to adoption? Is there an opportunity to deploy additional seats and on-ramps? How do we create impact? How does customer success, through training, through quantifiable ROI, through deploying this globally, deliver the promises that sales made early on? When you do that, there's enormous opportunity for upsell, cross-sell, and more importantly, really create evangelists out of those customers who then will repeat the cycle. So if you think more holistically, believe it or not, sales has a role in every part of this. And it's because it's a 360-degree view of a relationship. And if that relationship is critical to the success of your organization, the sales kickoff is a great chance for them to see a more holistic view and their roles in it. The other thing that you have to keep in mind, and I did a good amount of this in the research for the last book, the arc of any job is about 3 to 5 years. This is actually one of my original sketches, where you start, by investing in and you're learning the job, and it's actually a point of diminishing return because you got to invest the time, the capabilities, the capital to kind of learn. Then you kind of hit your stride. This is about execution. This is about application. This is about implementation. There's going to be some learning moments. We don't fail. We have learning moments as you go up and you're hitting your stride. You start to get up this hill and you're excelling because now you're really competent as a commercial rep. You know the product, you know the ecosystem. Enterprise rep, you know how to sell big enterprise deals. And guess what? You'll reach a plateau. You reach a plateau where let's be honest, you're bored, or your sellers are bored. And they've been doing the same thing in the same territory over and over again. And it's just, and if you don't interject, if you don't intervene, they're going to head step 5, which is decline. They start missing meetings. More dangerously, they start to wing it. More dangerously, they start to delegate, or worse yet, abdicate what they should be doing to others. I see this in reps. I see this in managers. I see this in executives. So think of a sales kickoff as an opportunity to jolt some new excitement, some new, again, not just motivation, but also inspire them to reinvent, rethink how they go to territory, how they approach their priorities, what product mix they can go to their accounts with. Phenomenal opportunity to not let them really fuel their stride and their excelling, not let them reach a plateau or decline. From a marketing standpoint, I'm a big believer of a CRO, CMO, really collaborating strongly also with the product teams and customer success to make it a great event. I don't know if you know, but recently we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 lunar landing. And they interviewed Michael Collins, the astronaut, that alongside Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And the comment was the fact that Kennedy said, in 10 years, we're going to put a man on space. The clarity of that single-mindedness. He didn't do a PowerPoint presentation. He didn't beat people over the head. It was the succinctness of it made it a rallying cry. The opportunity for you to think and lead differently with your next SKO is, how do we create, we're going to put a man on the moon in the next 10 years. How do we create that level of succinctness, that level of clarity? I promise you don't need to elaborate. You certainly don't need to go on tangents. How do we get succinct? How do we get articulate? How do we create, in essence, iconic moments? And your SKO could absolutely be one of those iconic moments. One of my strongest suggestions for you is you can certainly put up a lot of text in front of people. And I see slides. I see executive slides where you sit there, you be quiet. Let me tell you all the stuff I want you to read. And just like right now, if you're reading that, you're not listening to a word I'm saying. So if you're on that, or anybody is on that stage with a whole lot of slides, I don't know where is it you want me to look. And I'm not listening to anything you're saying. Conversely, I can put up a picture. And those of you who are a fan of literature know that the last paragraph was from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. We've got neuroimaging data that shows that our brains process visuals 60,000 times faster than we do text. Yet we're all hell-bent on presenting war and peace. So what if your strategy, what if your direction, what if your vision, what if your priorities was on one page? Now, even this has a lot of information on it, so you don't show all of this at once. You have it built through 3 or 4 slides, the story, but you tell a story about how this next year we're going to focus on 3 things: quality solutions in green, great place to work in red, effective communication in yellow. And the challenge with motherhood and apple pie is nobody's going to say, we're going to put out crappy products, we're going to be an awful place to work, and we're not going to talk to anybody. So you got to back it up with substance. But what if your entire growth strategy, your path forward, was on one page? And what if the CEO used that same vision in the welcome message to new hires? And we communicate that same message. And if we aligned or realigned, we use that same visual to tell our story. Now what you're doing is you're placing you're planting a seed of that iconography in their minds throughout the year, not just at the sales meeting, but really as an opportunity to think differently. So this isn't just an opinion. We did this through the pandemic in 2 hours. We helped a restaurant group rethink, reimagine. If people are not coming into a restaurant, number 1, let's repurpose our space. 2, I don't want to let good people go. Let's reskill them. 3, nobody's coming in our parking lots. Why don't we reconfigure it as a drive-through? 4, they love our menu. Let's reimagine some of our best-selling items on the menu as meal kits. 5, they love our chefs. Let's put them on YouTube and teach other people how to make some of our dishes at home. 6, let's serve the healthcare heroes that need meals 2 a.m. So when you articulate a vision, a direction visually, an intelligent person can look at this and say, I get it. I get where we're going. I get what we're doing. So I have a creative director, Lynn Wilson, incredibly talented, that I bring with me, and we capture, whether it's one session or the panel or the 3 days, on these 6 and 8 foot boards that we leave in the room. And what happens is people visually, it reinforces what they heard verbally. And it reinforces the key messages that you want to become a great messenger of. So we're big believers of visual, from briefings to visuals to story. You create alignment. At your SKO, you roll it out. You analyze what worked and what didn't. You course correct. That's how you execute. When you look for patterns of what your sellers are reacting to, capability gaps emerge, you optimize that. That's how you review, and the entire thing becomes unbelievable learning and growth potential. And you can then turn those into some amazing things. So what I'm really advocating is that you innovate, right? I'll wait. This is for all my PC user friends out there, right? So again, some great comments jumping in. Let's see if I scroll down to some of this. Greg, great points. I think finding ways to keep the session interactive is also key to ensure everyone stays engaged. Greg, I appreciate you jumping in. Unequivocally, yes. And my biggest concern is leaders who get on that stage and see the entire room is doing this and they keep going. Don't just stop, because they're not listening. That maybe that comes in coaching, but don't just keep rambling on because they're not listening to anything you're saying. So that's an opportunity to stop, get off the stage, engage them in the audience, stop with your PowerPoint, ask a question. But if you don't keep that audience engaged, you're just going to keep rambling on, and it's just not going to land. So thank you for that, Greg. Appreciate you jumping in. Barry's coming in. Timing is perfect. Strengthening partnerships and ensuring both sides have a clear picture of desired outcomes is critical. Barry, I'm a hugger in a non-creepy way. If we were together, I would hug you, because that's exactly right. So everybody can talk about partnerships. I'm always curious, what does that mean exactly, right? What are we doing to demonstrate that we're committed to this partnership? So I get it. It's a sales kickoff for your sellers. Do you have a channel alliance partner on stage talking about, here's how to work with us most effectively? Here's how we'll prioritize you. Here's how to not to screw up our relationship. right? So we can talk about partnerships or we can put them front and center. I've got several clients that their whole go-to-market strategy is through their channel partners. So channel first, channel led. It's fantastic to hear from these, channel and alliance partner leaders, as an example, that, we have a whole lot of other products and services that we can offer. We prioritize you guys. And again, I'm also a big believer of specificity conveys credibility. So don't tell me collectively, we love you. Jim in New Jersey, you're New Jersey of Jim, where are you? Right? Phenomenal guy because he did this, this, and this. Sandy in Phoenix, she is amazing. And here's what that inspires the rest of the team. I want to be like Jim and Sandy. I want him to talk about me next year. That's how you get the whole team together. So Barry, thanks for jumping in. Absolutely. Rick, blockchain technology is one topic that clients are preoccupied with. So having sales teams leave the SKO with interesting talking points or relevant is critical. Yes, sir. So holistically speaking, can you talk a little about the sales loop versus the sales funnel? Yeah, so I think you're referring to, let me just bring up what I believe you were referring to, the sales loop versus the sales funnel. So I'm a big fan of this maturity model. And Rick, I want you to overlay the funnel with something like this, but I want you to turn the funnel to its side because you're going to bring in a whole lot of prospects. Some of them become clients. The traditional funnel at the end, it stops. The sideway funnel, guess what? Has another funnel on the other side because now I can turn those first sales, the land and expand. And I got to tell you, we're doing this ourselves. I'm coaching a lot of clients. One of the biggest value adds of the right-hand side of this infinity loop is the upsell, cross-sell. You and I have been into accounts where the enterprise accounts, where the right arm has no clue what the left arm is doing. So I'm a huge believer of land and expand. I'm a huge believer of how do we get in with one solution and really help them see value in a lot of other things we do. So the funnel, the traditional funnel, I like to have it on its side, almost like a canyon that comes in. Once they become a customer, now on the right-hand side of this infinity loop, because customer success makes them incredibly, they see the impact of our solution, makes them incredibly successful. Sales is still involved, right? You can see that on the right-hand side of our infinity loop, customer success, marketing, and sales. Sales is nurturing that relationship, bringing them back full circle to do more with us. So thanks for jumping in. Going to Mark Fonseca. David, what's your opinion on bringing existing customers to your SKO and letting them evangelize how your product services have impacted their business to inspire your sales organization? Mark, I love it. Love that you're ahead of the bus because I'm going to actually share some of these ideas in a second. I love that idea. There is no better marketing, in my opinion, than word of mouth directly from the source, right? Videos and quotes are fantastic, but directly from a source. When a customer executive, I was at a client where they had their CISOs. They were in the security space. They had the CISO. We had this problem. We did our due diligence and either couldn't find another solution or we couldn't find another solution that was as elegant and clean as yours. We bought it, and that's when the relationship really took off because your development team got involved and we solved this problem and we had this. By the way, if it's all rosy, it looks like too manufactured. But if every healthy relationship goes through some challenges, right? We had this challenge and your team jumped in and took over. I am now drinking the Kool-Aid. I am eating our own cooking of, oh my God, how amazing are we? Because now there's an independent, and that's the key, an independent entity who is ideally the poster leader that I want to have as my customers saying how great we are. And I want to capture that. I want to bottle it. I want to take that to every customer and every prospect. And I don't think enough companies do that. Put the impact they create, right-hand side of this infinity loop, on stage. They don't put the evangelism, number 7 in this, on stage. So on that note, again, appreciate you guys jumping in. I would encourage you to keep going. Let me present 10 ideas for your consideration. Again, going back to before, if you assess your attendees before they show up, you're less likely to create one size fits all. And I love big stages and opening and big events and your breakouts. What if there were customized mini experiences? So we use something called HBDI, the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. By the way, most people understand right brain, left brain. It's actually more sophisticated than that. We all have 4 quadrants. This is how we think. This is how we make decisions. This is how we solve problems. This is our God-given wiring. And we're all wired very differently. If you understand this about your sellers before they come, you can create a much more impactful breakout sessions based on their unique nuances. 2, create a forum for content discussions. One of the things that's really cool is asking the attendees for the most impactful outcomes. Let's not confuse output with outcome. You putting on an SKO and sessions is output. What they take away is outcome that creates impact. If you haven't seen this, South by Southwest uses a platform called Panel Picker. They put the content that they believe would be interesting to their attendees, their audience, and people vote on it. But you know what? They're not going to take any harebrained idea, right? There's a filtering mechanism, and the selection process is the community, your sellers vote. There's an advisory board that votes, and the staff. So the content becomes much more relevant to the sellers and the audience sitting, not just what the leadership team either wants to feed them or believes they should feed them. And I'm not taking anything away from the insights of the CROs and CMOs. I'm asking, could there be a better way? Something to think about of put the content up, let them vote in advance. And I know what you're thinking. Who's got time? Direct correlation between the prep work you do before and the quality, the outcomes of that SKO if you're after. By all means, if you're just looking for a party and a great get-together, God bless you. I'd love to know when and where, and I'll be there. Conversely, if you want real impact from your meetings, from your events, these are the kinds of things that you may want to think about. During, balance the external with the internal thought and practice leaders. You bring a thought leader, that's great. What the hell you want me to do with it? You also want practice leaders. You want people who are implementing. You want to balance the thinking with the doing. You want to balance the internal experts, the internal subject matter experts with some external perspectives, external point of view. Again, my request of you is make sure they're relevant. Make sure it's not just the CEO's pet project speaker. It's actually somebody who's going to help those sellers create real impact. Less is more. Create opportunities for visual stories, informal interactions. Some of the best conversations I've ever heard have been in the hallway. Where we just did a case study or example of the Seattle rep who's done a great job, and the Fort Lauderdale rep finds the Seattle rep in the hallway and say, hey, I've got an account that's very similar. What did you do? How'd you do that? What worked? What didn't? So create opportunities for that. If it's content after content after content after content, people's eyes are going to glaze over. So less is more. How do we less to really create opportunities for those conversations, collaborations? Save the date, incorporate key ideas into that development path. So the QBRs, more conversations, less presentations. I'm a big believer of learning happens in circles, not rows. So how do we create more circles and kind of one page, go implement? So here's an overview of a new product, feature, function, go implement it. Here's a new go-to-market approach, go implement it. I like practical, pragmatic takeaways. After, invite content presenters from the SKO to come back, maybe go into field on regular updates. Hold the field leaders accountable for follow-through cadence. If we present something at the SKO, how do we follow through to ensure it gets implemented? Measure material, skills, knowledge, behavior changes throughout the year. We presented something in January. Did anybody do anything with it continuously? And don't just do that in December. do it throughout the year. So these are just some of the ideas for your consideration. I'm going to wrap up with some marquee events. Again, in Curve Benders, I wrote about a path, how to build strategic relationships that will accelerate your learning and growth. So beyond your sales kickoff, I want you to think about a handful of ideas. Again, we did this ourselves. Think about a customer leadership summit. I brought in 20 senior executives from some of our client companies for a summit and across the spectrum of companies. It would be very easy for you to say, well, what is the second largest travel company in the world have anything to do with an internet security company? Talent, go-to-market strategies, what's working, what's not working. Channel alliance partners, again, phenomenal opportunities. I know you do some of this. I want you to think differently about how you could do some of this. Leadership retreats, your own leadership team. How do we get them out of the business so they can think about the business? I love QBRs, but we're so enthralled in account reviews and those. That's not really an opportunity to think. So maybe piggyback on the front end or back end of your QBRs. I love this idea of your plus ones or your next generation of leaders, right? If you're trying to develop someone to lead the BDRs or the SDRs or the commercial team or channel, how do we get them together to learn and grow the next job, the next opportunity? And by the way, this is not something you want to abdicate to HR. HR and learning and development should absolutely be involved, but you know what it takes to be an exceptional leader at your organization. How do we get that group together and really pour some love and support and learning and growth into them? And then obviously our international relationships. A lot of times international teams feel like redheaded stepchildren, particularly of US-based companies. So really important that not just you bring them in for your SKO, but how do we go and have regional meetings in, London for EU, Dubai. I'm headed to Dubai in a couple of weeks for a meeting. So how do we go to that region, bring regional people in and make sure those are productive? If you do, and as any of these, what I call your marquee events, I'm a big fan of smaller, more intimate. I love, 500,000 people, but I also really appreciate 20 people. And the comments from those executives was, we love the intimacy of this gathering. So think of more intimate micro events, cross-pollinate expertise and relationships. None of us have all the answers. So that customer I invite, I want to know how they implemented, it could be very different than how we proposed. What I care about is the results they got. So cross-pollinate expertise and relationships. Ask your channel partners to invite their relationships. You bring some of yours. That works really well. And then, as I said, and Mark Fonseca beat me to it, your strongest ambassadors are your existing customers. So our event, I invited customers, I invited friends, I invited partners, I invited prospects. When they sit next to each other and they talk about how do you know this company, how do you work with them? Oh my gosh, they did this for us. It becomes an enormously valuable. So I'd love to continue the conversation. I'm in the sales community. Jump in there. We also have a private community called the Nour Forum. So that's another good opportunity to come in, join us. Let's continue this conversation. I'll post in both about upcoming sales keynotes, including this presentation. If you want a copy of this presentation, I'll put it in our forum. Come join us. I'll also put it in the sales community. Come join us. Let's talk about it. And I'm going to end with this. Let me pause for a minute and have you read this. Gary Hamel is one of my favorite thinkers. And I cringe when I hear people talk about their strategic planning or the strategic planning. It's not a calendar-driven anything. It's a chance to see the world in a new way, to think and lead in new and unconventional ways. Make no mistake about it, your sales kickoff, your next marquee event is a phenomenal opportunity to think and lead in new and unconventional ways. So I'm grateful for Randy for having me back. I kind of kicked off the Sales Tech Insights with him, and it's been a phenomenal, I forget how many episodes he's done, but it's been a phenomenal run for the sales community, and I know they're going to continue to do great things. So I'll stick around. If you have questions, comments, I'll also go to the event page. But on that note, again, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. I hope this was useful to you. And I look forward to seeing Randy and his great guests in the future episodes of this live stream. Tucker, thank you. I want to thank everybody. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next time. All the best.